So, welcome to this networking session, which is all about how to measure your social impact. Together, we're delighted to have Rana from Khushi Kantha, and she'll be taking us through the things that you need to know about measuring your social impact. I'll be sharing the slides, so it's going to be a bit like Chris Whitty, and she'll ask me to advance them by sharing. If that's okay.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks so much, Joanna. Do you want me to make a start?
Yes, yeah, perfect.
Yeah, so thanks so much for joining today, and it's great to see some familiar faces and names. So I'm basically going to present a case study of the impact measurement approach that we're taking. And then there'll be some time for some questions and answers afterwards. And obviously, if anyone wants to have any kind of follow-up conversations, then I'd be really happy to do so. Okay, if we could have the first slide, please, that'd be great. Yeah, so maybe you can just click through so the bits come up, if that's all right. Yeah, so I wanted to start with basically asking, oh, is it going all flicky again, my video? Yeah, I think you're on mute, Joanna.
A little bit, but we can still hear you.
Okay, great. It's a bit distracting. I seem to be doing a crazy dance. Oh, there we go. It stopped. Okay. Well, yeah. I just wanted to start by kind of asking you guys if anyone's willing or happy to share what you mean by impact, because obviously it's a term that's quite complicated and got different meanings to different people. And I wondered if anyone wanted to share what impact means to different kinds of stakeholders. So most importantly, I mean, whether you use the term beneficiaries, which I know is a term that a lot of people don't like to use, but the people that your social enterprises are hoping to benefit. If any of you have any thoughts in terms of how they conceptualize impact. Or also some of the other key stakeholders like your staff, your board members, if you have any board, if you have a board in place, your customers, maybe funders, if any of you are receiving grants at the moment, or your investors. But just if anyone has any thoughts in terms of how they conceptualize impact.
So you can either put this in the chat or raise your hand, and we'll come to you live.
Brilliant. Thanks, Joe. So supply partners are seeing impact as having a voice, but also the key one is fair pay. Yep. Brilliant. Thanks. And yeah, I guess in terms of having a voice, I mean, that's one of the things that I sort of tried to use as a starting point. So my professional background is in impact measurement. That's what I do for a living. I've been doing it for the past 15 years. So generally in terms of kind of launching and running a social enterprise, I feel like impact measurement is the only real bit that I kind of vaguely know how to do, to be honest. So, but yeah, in terms of the idea of having a voice, as I'll go on to explain, we've tried to use a participatory approach to creating our impact measurement system to try and make sure that the way in which we're measuring impact is meaningful for the mothers that we partner with, who are at the core of our social enterprise mission. Yeah, living wage work, brilliant. And obviously in terms of the living wage approach, there's actually kind of a methodology behind that. So that's kind of a concrete indicator that you can use. And yeah, number of hours of work created. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. And there's some other social entrepreneurs, I think, who use that as a core metric. I think it's something that's kind of simple and tangible that everybody can relate to and understand. But I guess there's also a qualitative dimension in terms of we're thinking about decent work, kind of in line with the social sustainable development goals like SDG 8. I guess the idea is in line with the idea of fair pay and kind of decent work, that there's a qualitative element to that work as well. So it's about dignified work and positive working conditions and things as well. Does anyone else want to share, or should we move on? Yeah, maybe we can move on if that's all right, Joanna. Thanks. But I guess just the idea is kind of as a starting point, thinking about impact means different things to different people, and it's important. So if you can keep clicking through, I think it's they just come up as bullet points, but that it's important when you're kind of starting to think about impact and designing an impact measurement strategy that you understand and take into account the views of your different stakeholders. And I guess maybe you started with kind of, for you as a founder of a social enterprise, I guess you were driven by kind of an impact vision of wanting to make the world a better place in some way. And hopefully other stakeholders kind of share that vision, but I guess everybody has maybe a slightly different lens on it. So maybe if we can go to the next slide, please. So I don't know if any of you guys, I presume some of you firstly know what I mean by a theory of change, and secondly maybe have a theory of change. Do any of you have a theory of change for your social enterprise? I mean, whether it's in your head or whether it's something that's documented and maybe you share it on your website or in kind of an impact report or a blog post or anything like that. Lux Lou's brilliant. Yep, so you have a theory of change. Anybody else? Well, I mean, so theory of change, again, I guess like the term impact can mean different things to different people, but basically the idea is it's a way of kind of expressing the relationship. Yeah, we do, but I didn't realize it was called that. Yeah, again, I think with impact measurement it can kind of seem quite scary because there's a lots of oh, thanks for sharing the link. I'll check that after if that's okay. There's a lot of technical terminology that can kind of seem a bit scary, but yeah, quite often I think we're kind of doing these things naturally because it's important. So if you can go back a couple of slides, if that's all right. So back rather than forwards. Brilliant. Yeah, I think a lot of the time we're doing this kind of stuff naturally because it's obviously really important to us and it's what drives us, but maybe we know we're not using the technical terms or whatever. But basically the idea of a theory of change, so it's a theory for how change happens. So you I think the main kind of important bit of the idea is that you start with the ultimate impact that you're hoping to create or that you're hoping to contribute to. So if you kind of think about what you're ultimately trying to do, for example, kind of stop the intergenerational transmission of poverty in Bangladesh. For example, that's a massive thing that however many mothers I could partner with, however many blankets we could sell, however effectively we're doing what we're trying to do, we're never going to achieve that on our own. So the idea with impact is it's like the big picture that you're aiming to contribute to as an organization. So you kind of start with that big picture and then you work backwards in terms of the outcomes that you're hoping to generate, and that's more in terms of thinking about the outcomes you specifically as a social enterprise are hoping to generate that will contribute, sort of how you're going to add value and contribute to that big picture impact. And then you work backwards through outputs and activities, and I'll show you on the next slides for Khushi Kantha, like the theory of change we've developed. I think one of the challenges that I had, so my background is in the international development and humanitarian sector, so I'm used to working with theory of change and then kind of monitoring and evaluation systems. So data collection, kind of indicators and tools and processes, but going into a lot of detail. So, if we're working on, I've worked on programs where the budget for the program, the overall budget is like millions of pounds, and for impact measurement alone, then the budget can be like hundreds of thousands of pounds. So you're basically going into loads of detail, the grant funders, for example, like institutional donors, want loads and loads of detail. So that the problem that I've been having, very much kind of not being from a business background, is thinking and used to working with customers and kind of things that look snappy on Instagram, for example, or even on the website, is trying to kind of keep things simple and not going into all the detailed sort of assumptions. I think as social entrepreneurs, we understand that actually impact is complicated and challenging, and there can be trade-offs between different types of positive impacts, and then trade-offs between trying to have a positive impact but also making sure that what we're doing is financially viable. And so theory of change can be a helpful approach for trying to kind of understand and unpack some of those tensions and also the assumptions behind the different levels. So for example, and to try and clarify what I mean by that, an example I would often use is, so for example, in this session, the activity you can say is that I'm talking to you about impact measurement. I'm explaining how we measure our impact, and I'm trying to maybe give you some advice in terms of how you can effectively measure your impacts. And then I'm kind of assuming that the outcome from that training is maybe you've got a better understanding of how to measure impact. Maybe you're feeling more confident about to measure your impact. And ultimately, then there would be kind of a practical implication that you would then feel better able to more effectively measure your impact, and you would go on and actually be able to do so kind of in your individual practice. But in terms of the logical assumption that I'm making between that activity and the outcome, or the output being that the training has been delivered, is that people are paying attention. You know, people with their videos off, for example, as I often do in a webinar. Maybe that's because you're also, you know, doing the online shopping, you're having to deal with your children having a tantrum, or all sorts of other things. So actually you're not able to pay attention to the training for whatever reason. Or maybe you are, but actually English isn't your first language, or I know I speak really fast, particularly when I'm over caffeinated like today, or, you know, I'm just not explaining things clearly and you actually don't have a clue what I'm banging on about. And so again, like, the output would be that the session has been delivered, but actually that, you know, the outcome isn't that you've managed to improve your understanding and confidence in terms of impact measurement. So basically the idea behind theory of change, so usually it's represented in some kind of a diagram. I'm not sure how well you can see this. I can send a copy of our impact report so you can maybe see it better if you're interested. But it's basically a diagram that kind of shows the steps in terms of the activities that you're doing as a social enterprise, how that ultimately leads into the impact that you're trying to contribute to. And then, at least sort of in the development sector, you know, kind of the sector that I come from, there tends to be a narrative that would accompany that, and then that's kind of where you'd put in the assumptions and sort of start mapping out the evidence you have behind your theory of change in terms of why you're making those assumptions, basically. And then you can also see maybe where some of the evidence gaps are, and that's kind of where learning comes in. You can think, well, actually, we're assuming that X will lead to Y, but maybe we need to reflect on that and learn as we go along. And see whether our assumptions are correct, basically. But again, in terms of, you know, maybe what we're communicating to customers on our website, through social media, however else you communicate to customers, like, that's a lot of detail and it's kind of complicated. So it's thinking that's one of the things I've been struggling with, is sort of how much detail to share and how to communicate that. So maybe if we can have the next slide, if that's okay. So I don't know if people have heard of the Gross National Happiness Index. It's something that's come from Bhutan. Has anyone heard of that or got any familiarity with that? Yeah, so it's basically in the same way that I think poverty is now understood as a multidimensional concept. So poverty isn't just about income, right? It's not just about whether you have 5p a day to live off or £5 or £5,000. There's many other aspects to poverty around kind of your ability to make life choices, and, you know, things around kind of psychological dimensions to poverty and all sorts of other things. So in Bhutan, they've developed this measure called the Gross National Happiness Index, which is basically supposed to be an alternative to GDP as a measure of development, or, you know, kind of a country's development. So they're saying, actually, you know, it's not just important what the average income per capita is. Actually, development and well-being and all those kind of concepts that go alongside it, that there's more to it than that, which I think is kind of a general narrative, hopefully, that we're sort of seeing in terms of how people sort of think about the world and development and all that kind of thing. And when I started thinking about how to develop the impact measurement system for Khushi Kantha, I came across this thing. There's not actually a lot written about it. I don't know if it was maybe kind of an initial idea that someone wrote a paper about that hasn't sort of been taken up. But basically, they've taken this concept of the Gross National Happiness Index and they've applied it specifically to businesses. So originally it was applied kind of at the national level, and this is specifically for businesses. And it has two key dimensions, as you can see on the slide: worker happiness, so looking at your individual workers, and then organizational conditions for happiness. And the kinds of things that it measured seemed to fit quite well with our theory of change and what I wanted to measure. So it's about looking at living standards for workers. So that's where things like income and fair wages come in, but also psychological well-being, health, use of time. So thinking about things like work-life balance, for example. One of the things that's really important to us is that we kind of aim to offer basically the opposite of the working conditions that women would get in the garments industry that Bangladesh is so famous for. So it's not just about, you know, how much they're earning per hour or per day, but it's about being able to have like flexibility of their work, you know, so they can kind of work from the safety of their own homes, and they can do it around childcare and all their other responsibilities. And then the organizational conditions for happiness. So that's things like, well, I mean, here it's phrased as ecological diversity, but that's about kind of environmental impacts. So that comes more kind of at the organizational level as opposed to the individual worker. Things around cultural diversity, good governance. So that's making sure that the way in which we're running our operations is transparent. You know, we're doing things in an ethical way. Stuff, I guess, like basics around kind of paying tax properly. But then things around kind of supply chains and sort of the bigger picture, if that makes sense. Maybe if we can go to the next slide, if that's okay. Thanks. So yeah, going back to what I was saying about using a participatory approach, and sorry, I guess I should just say in terms of the Gross National Happiness Index for business, so I included the link to the paper in the previous slide, and I guess the slides will get shared. But basically the paper is quite long and detailed. It's brilliant in terms of giving you a lot of detail of how the approach can be implemented and the kind of indicators that can be measured. But we did quite a lot of work to adapt the approach because some elements of it weren't relevant to our particular theory of change and what we're trying to achieve and the impacts that we want to measure. And also just in terms of the scale at which we're operating and the resources we have, like it was too much basically. So we thought, okay, we want to start. It was great as inspiration as a starting point, but I think again with any of these kind of frameworks and tools, and there's so much stuff out there online, that there's a need to you know, take an approach and obviously not just use it off the shelf, right? Adapt it, like use bits of different tools and methods that work for you. But we've tried to use a participatory approach. So I really wanted to start with, you know, we talk about empowerment. Again, I think empowerment's kind of a dirty, like controversial word. Lots of people don't like the term empowerment. For us, it alliterates quite nicely with embroidery. So we use the tagline embroidered with empowerment. But yeah, so in terms of the concept of empowerment, I wanted to start by asking the individual mothers that we partner with, each of them, what does empowerment mean to them? We struggled a little bit in terms of, so I think when I initially wanted to set up Khushi Kantha, I envisaged that I would be able to spend time physically in Bangladesh. Like my Bengali is not fluent, but it's enough, at least in person, to kind of have meaningful conversations. You know, I've kind of run focus group discussions and things in villages, but obviously with the pandemic, everything's had to happen at a distance. So the actual data has been collected by my ex-brother-in-law, Hassan, who obviously does speak, you know, Bengali. He's Bangladeshi, but he's not, he's an accountant by training. He's not kind of trained in qualitative data collection. So I think in terms of kind of speaking to the women and saying, what does empowerment mean to you? Again, it's quite an abstract concept. So we struggled a bit when I was saying, oh, can you ask them what does empowerment mean? And we want to have some definitions that are meaningful for our measurement system. But again, thinking about customers, we also wanted to, you know, to be quite frank, have some nice quotes that we could use on Instagram and stuff. You know, empowerment means this to me. And we struggled a little bit to kind of get some substantial data basically in terms of what empowerment meant. And this is something I see a lot in my day job on impact measurement when you're doing participatory data collection, particularly with people who aren't used to being asked about their views and experiences and kind of limited literacy levels. Then quite often it can be quite challenging to have those kind of conversations. So I thought, okay, let's make it more tangible. And let's ask them right now, what's their number one dream for themselves? So as women, as in individuals, what's their number one dream for their children? What's their number one dream for their family or their household as a whole? And then what's their number one dream for their community? Because the idea is ultimately, you know, we want to have positive multiplier effects within the community. And you can see, for example, Asfara, so this is one of the mothers she partnered with, we partner with, she said her number one dream for her children is to be able to send them to the best higher education institute that's possible. So in terms of what she's able to afford, and then what the kind of like physical feasible options are in the location in which she lives. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, so basically the idea with this slide is we used a participatory approach, but we also balance that with internationally validated tools. So I wanted to make sure that the methodology that we're using also has some rigor behind it. Because I think, again, I mean, I guess my experience is with grant funders as opposed to with investors. But quite often they'll say, oh, we love the idea of a participatory qualitative approach. You know, that's really nice that you're incorporating people's voices, but also they want to see hard numbers. And so the Warwick Edinburgh mental well-being scale is something that I've come across in my work. I think I first used it when I was working with War Child in an impact measurement role. And it's basically it's freely available. You know, you can so if we just go back to the previous slide, it's freely available, so you can download it online, and it just has a series of statements. And then so we use this questionnaire with the women, and we can get a picture. And when I say internationally validated, I basically mean it's been developed by academics, and it's been tested in lots of different contexts, and they've run some kind of statistical analysis and stuff to show that it's a tool that works in lots of different places, if that makes sense. So yeah, we've got some other tools in terms of the way we're measuring income. You know, we're kind of doing that in a way that's sort of acknowledged as the sort of best practice that's got some rigor behind it. And if you see on the left-hand side, yeah, these are just some of the different things that we're talking to the women about. So as I explained about, you know, what their individual number one dream is, about their well-being and about the income. So we asked them both what's their individual monthly income, but also what the household income is, because we're interested in not just whether they're earning more money than they used to do before they partnered with us, but also whether they're now able to contribute a bigger percentage towards the overall household income, because that's really important in terms of their ability to get involved in household decisions. You know, like if suddenly now they're earning like the same amount or even more, some of them, than their husbands, then it sort of affects the power dynamics. And then we also ask them questions like, as I said, around working conditions, but also about working hours, like how many hours a week would they ideally want to work compared to the number of hours that we're able to provide at the moment. I think Jitna was saying that you use number of hours of work created as an indicator. And yeah, we thought that was important. It's not just how much they're earning, but whether we're able to provide them with enough work and kind of regular work, if that makes sense. And this was one of the key things actually in terms of that they're less happy about, or one of the things that we're not having the impact we'd like at the moment, is that they'd like more work assurance. They want more work, basically. I mean, there's then a balance around obviously kind of laws around, you know, number of hours of work. Like obviously if they say actually we'd like to work 100 hours a week so that we can earn as much money as possible, we can't just say, okay, great, if we've got enough money and enough customers to be able to do that, because obviously we also have to comply with you know, good practices. So again, I think with all of these things, like as you start to kind of really think about it and unpack it, it just gets complicated, basically. If we can have the next slide, if that's okay. And then this is just an example of how we've presented the data in our impact report. So this is the impact data, the data on income. So we've got a picture of these are some of the mothers that we partner with, and then just giving a little bit of narrative. I don't know if this is necessarily the most effective way to do it. Like I'm not a marketing and comms expert by any stretch of the imagination, but this is, yeah, just in terms of trying to give a bit of a sense of taking the raw data. And by raw data, I mean the original figures that we get from the women, and we had it in a spreadsheet of, you know, the name of each mother, how much they're earning now, how much they were earning before they partnered with us, and then what I was saying about the contribution to the household, and trying to kind of turn it into a bit of a story, if that makes sense. Maybe we can have the next slide if that's okay. So then in terms of our theory of change and how we're thinking about impact, obviously kind of most importantly is the sort of the livelihoods, like socio-economic impacts that we're having on the mothers that we partner with. That was why I wanted to start Khushi Kantha in the first place, and then the environmental impacts around you know, reclaiming and repurposing and reusing fabric. but I also wanted to think about impact more broadly. Like, we've been really lucky to benefit from a lot of volunteers, particularly because we got started during the pandemic and there were lots of people sitting around on furlough who wanted to do something positive with their time. But again, having been a volunteer myself, a lot, through my background in the not-for-profit sector, and working a lot with volunteers and interns, for example, in various charities I've worked with, I wanted to make sure that the volunteer experience was two-way, that the volunteers were getting something out of it as well. I mean, partly, obviously, because it's, an ethical, moral, kind of the moral dimension of wanting to make sure if they're giving up their time and energy to help us, they're getting something positive back. But also, I think in terms of, from a kind of a strategic perspective, that if they're getting something tangible from it as well, they're more likely to keep volunteering and, produce something that's useful. I think, I don't know if you guys work with volunteers, but I'm not sure if no such thing as a free lunch is quite the right phrase, but I've definitely wasted a lot of hours of kind of onboarding volunteers who then end up disappearing or, producing something that's not useful or whatever, and not delivering on what they've committed to. So I think if you get an understanding of what the volunteer wants to get from it and kind of a two-way exchange, then it sort of makes for more effective collaborations. So yeah, on this slide, you can just see some of the questions that I use to get feedback from volunteers. So if we go on to the next slide, if that's okay. So this is looking at our environmental impacts. And yeah, I mean, the key indicators that we're looking at is the kilograms of cotton that we're reclaiming, repurposing, and reusing. So we have got certified cotton donated by a supplier from the Bangladeshi garments industry. And so yeah, we talk about the kilos of cotton, but then I mean, I was kind of thinking in terms of how people get their head around it. So this comes back to the way in which you communicate data. We thought about it in terms of the equivalent of cotton t-shirts. We were trying to think of kind of an everyday item that people could understand. The same in terms of saving water. We equated it to the number of baths that were saved. I mean, I don't think we're the only people that are doing that. I've seen in a lot of impact reports, people do this kind of thing, just to sort of try and make the impacts tangible in a way that customers and kind of other stakeholders can understand. And then, yeah, the same with our carbon footprint. So I worked with a lovely volunteer, Claire, who calculated our carbon footprint in a really comprehensive way. So she got in touch with the company, we use a branded stamp on our packaging rather than stickers, and she got in touch with the company who made the stamp to understand the carbon footprint involved in producing the rubber that's the stamp's made from, and then the company to understand the carbon footprint associated with producing the ink. And so she came up with this great long calculation, and then again it was kind of about how we distill that and communicate that in our impact report and a blog post that she wrote. If I could have the next slide, if that's okay.
Go international court. Quick. Credit remaining. £10. 9.
Sorry. And then I was going to say, yeah, I mean, this is just, I guess, to going back to the idea of communicating data. So what I've found, and again, I guess this is kind of a learning point for me in terms of my background of not going into too much detail and, kind of, I mean, they say firstly, a picture can tell 1,000 words, whatever the cliche is, but also, sometimes just having a little snippet that kind of makes it more of a story that can kind of bring things to life, I think can be quite effective in terms of communicating impact. So it's thinking about not just the process of collecting data and, what kind of indicators you use and how you're going about, asking questions to the people that you work with, for example, but then how you present that data. So yeah, these are just some examples of some quotes. So the first one's from one of our stitchers, the second one's from one of our volunteers, and the last one is from one of our customers. So yeah, part of our theory of change is around customers buying less and buying better. So we're kind of trying to think about how we might be able to measure that and evidence that. If I could have the next slide, please. Yeah, so then just in terms of our next step. So that was to kind of give you a little bit of a flavor of like some of the thinking that we've been doing, and some of the different dimensions of impact that we're considering, and some of the choices we've made around how we're collecting data. But I guess first of all, like the things that we're measuring, then how we're choosing to measure them and how we're choosing to collect the data, but then also how we're choosing to present the data. But yeah, it's definitely, I think there's a lot more that we could be doing. And one of the things that I think I've really realized is that I guess impact measurement is kind of my comfort zone. As I said at the beginning, it's the only bit of running a social enterprise that I have a vague idea how to do. So I've probably been focusing too much probably on having quite an elaborate impact measurement approach compared to the scale of what we're actually doing in terms of generating impact. So I'm now trying to spend more time on thinking about how we can actually generate impact, because it's all very well having nice ways of, measuring empowerment in a participatory way and blah, blah, blah. But actually, if we're not selling any blankets, then we're not having any impact to measure. So yeah, I'm thinking about different approaches for that. And then in terms of the impact measurement, so our broader theory of change, we look at, so our name is Khushi Kantha, which means happy blanket in Bengali. And in our theory of change, we basically use the word Khushi and think about kind of different types of stakeholders that we want to make happy, including the kind of personifying the environment as a stakeholder. And children are ultimately a stakeholder that we want to have a positive impact on, to the children of the mothers that we're partnering with. But we're also trying to do stuff, use an impact measurement approach that is kind of proportionate and logical. So at the moment, we've only been going for, our production's been going for maybe about 18 months. And we're definitely not at the stage where we're able to, one of the main things I want to do at the moment, we're still paying piece rates to the mothers. I'd really like to be able to shift to a monthly wage, so they've got a reliable income that's coming in every month, and other kind of benefits associated with that. But at the moment, we're not trying to measure any kind of impacts on children, because like realistically, the stage at which we're at, I don't think we're going to be able to demonstrate and evidence impacts on children around things to do with quality of education, factors related to malnutrition, and other kind of things that we would ultimately like to positively influence. And then the same in terms of the community level. So the idea is that at the moment we're starting really small and working with a small number of mothers, but ultimately we'd like to have positive ripple effects across the community by I guess like an injection of capital into the community. But yeah, we're definitely not at that stage yet. So I didn't kind of want to waste time and energy trying to figure out how we measure the community level impacts, other than asking the mothers like what their dream is for the community. Because our ultimate aspiration is to reinvest our profits into the broader community. So I'm really conscious from, having spent a lot of time working in Bangladesh, that the risk of doing more harm than good. So working with a really small number of mothers, even within one village, there's so many other women who could benefit from what we're doing. And so I don't want to be just kind of only focusing on these women and hopefully having a positive impact on them, but then thinking, what about the rest of the community and all the kind of tensions that can bring. So the idea is, as and when we hopefully have some kind of substantial profits that we don't just need to reinvest into the business operations, we would reinvest them into the broader community, but we would ask the mothers that we're partnering with what their priorities are. So rather than us deciding what to invest in, we would ask the mothers what to invest in. But all of that kind of stuff is further down the line. And then, as I said, in terms of customers, I would love to come up with some sort of approach for tracking positive impacts on customers beyond just at the moment. We're trying to figure out our repeat, the percentage of customers that make a repeat purchase, and then getting some reviews. So we've got some qualitative data. Financial transparency. So I would love to be able to say, right, if you buy a blanket from us and again, I've seen some really brilliant examples of organizations that do this, but saying if you pay us £50 for a blanket, this is exactly where the money goes, and you'd be going to have a picture of the blanket and kind of showing all those sums and exactly where it all goes. But I don't think our business model is solid. The numbers are, we're still kind of playing around a bit with the numbers, so I don't feel quite ready to do that. And then I'm doing a master's in sustainability leadership at Cambridge. It's the Cambridge Institute for Sustainable Leadership. I was really lucky to get a bursary from Chanel to do this master's, and there's various types of assignments that I have to do through the masters, and I'm trying to use those to figure out some of these, the kind of stuff that I have to do anyway for the masters, but I'm trying to use those to figure out some of these issues and questions, basically. So actually this morning I was working on a strategic action plan that we have to develop, which is looking at how we can further improve our impact measurement system, but also to integrate the business metrics. So at the moment, we're like, the stuff we're measuring in terms of impacts, as I said, is stuff like how we're hopefully improving the lives of the mothers and the positive environmental impacts. But in order to have those impacts, we need to actually generate some impact by making more sales and building up our customer base. So I want to bring those two sides together. So that's what the strategic action plan is, basically, like figuring out how to do that, if that makes sense. I think that's the last slide, but maybe there's one more, right? Yeah, and then these are some links to our blog. So some of these questions around I guess both in terms of figuring out the impacts we want to have, and how the best kind of approach to generating impact, but also kind of our impact measurement journey. We've captured some of that on our blog. And then I guess also thinking about kind of impact measurement, like the relationship between generating impact and measuring impact. So we've tried to kind of capture that in quite a comprehensive ethical policy in terms of thinking about how the decisions we make every day, kind of strategically and operationally, how we kind of put impact at the forefront of those, if that makes sense. And then there's just some links, like if you want to get in touch to like have an informal discussion around impact measurement and what you guys are doing, like if I can make any suggestions or anything, then I'm very happy to do that.
That's lovely. Thanks, Laura. I'll be sending around the slides to everybody that's signed up. So you don't need to sort of you can take a screenshot if you want, but if you don't worry, you won't miss it. I'll send it out. I'm going to stop sharing now and see if we have any questions from people on the call. It's very comprehensive. Yeah, it feels like I know a lot more about impact measurement than I did an hour ago. Does anybody have any thoughts, any ideas about how what you've heard in the last half hour or so you can integrate that into what you're currently doing? Anybody want to share any extra things that they feel that they're doing that in this space?
Yeah, it'd be brilliant to hear what other people are doing, or like any best practices, either from your own organizations or anything you've seen that you think works really well, or also kind of the challenge, like maybe the biggest challenges you're grappling with in terms of impact measurement, like what you're struggling with. I said it's, as I said, for me, it's kind of the communication side of sort of simplifying it and sharing stuff in a compelling, concise kind of way. You probably picked up that I'm a bit of a waffler, so.
Of interest, does anybody else produce an impact report like on an annual basis or whatever? Brian, yeah.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yes, we do an impact chairman's report on our accounts, quite a lengthy one, which we've just completed. But we also do impact statements, sustainability statements. We class impact and sustainability as alongside each other, and we have 7 measures. Shall I tell you what they are?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, we have 7 measures. We have financial sustainability. We've been going 10 years and grown in the last 5 years by 100%. So we're doing. Let's
tell us
right.
where you're from as well, Brian, because we haven't got it.
Yes,
on there.
Sorry, we're Glenwilver Limited, a social enterprise based in Wales, in North Wales, and we have 2 strands to the business. Well, a number of strands, but one is a 120-seater cafe bistro. We're on the edge of a World Heritage site, so we've got a lot of tourists, a lot of residents. But the aim of, or the objective when we set up the social enterprise was for the benefit of the local community. So we measure that continually, and we measure by, as I say, by financial sustainability, evidenced on our new investments. We continually reinvest in the business. I should add as well, sorry, there is a second strand to the business, which is a large house which has 11 offices, which we rent out to local businesses. So it's their employment as well, and we support them in various ways. We also house the local police station within the whole complex. So it's very much a community hub, and that's our objective. We measure cafe customer visitors and reviews, and take those reviews seriously on how we operate and the menu that we offer. And we've grown customer visitors now to about 65,000 now per annum, and that's locals, our local people, our local residents, and also visitors to the World Heritage Site as well. We have tenants, business tenants, and then we measure their satisfaction, and we have easy tenant licenses, regular meetings, rent holidays if they're having problems, and continually talk and chat to them. So we measure that satisfaction. We have a community room that's free for local usage for the community. So all charities, social groups can just give us notice, and they can take the community room, and we measure that as well. How many local groups are using the community room, and it's very busy. One of the most important things recently has been energy usage. We're a high energy user, and we're reducing our electricity. We've reduced it by about 25%, and we hope to get to 40% by installing and investing in solar panels, which we're going to do very shortly. Community involvement, we measure that. So we have a town councillor and a county councillor on the board, and we're in close links with the town council, which I'm chairman of anyway, as a director, and we support their food cupboard. We support various objectives of the local within the local community, and then we, employee satisfaction is very important to us. We have a great team. We employ 17 within the cafe, but another 30 within the house with their businesses. So we measure their support and their satisfaction. So that's basically all about us, I think. But we are one thing, Laura, that what we do is go in for the social enterprise awards, because that measures us quite nicely. So we send all this information off. We're in the top 100 NatWest social enterprises in the UK, and that for the third year running. And we also won the social enterprise UK community. I forgot what it was called now. the transformation community business in 2021. Now that gives, there's a lot of information we have to do, a lot of work we have to do for that, but that gives us a good measurement externally into our business. Yeah. I'll stop there.
Thanks. Yeah, no, I was just looking you guys up, so that's why I was typing. It all sounds amazing, and that's definitely the bit that we're missing is around the financial sustainability measurement.
Yeah.
So, yeah, thanks so much for sharing. And yeah, the Social Enterprise UK and there's some other awards and stuff. Yeah, I think that's a really good point, and actually that's one of the things that I might look at for my master's dissertation is, I guess, not necessarily awards, but looking at kind of sustainability standards. Like, again, for a really small social enterprise like us, who's got well, I've got limited time and energy, I'm trying to do other things at the same time. It's sort of to try and put like an impact measurement system in place, but then there's all these standards. There's like the fair trade standards, there's like the Nest Artisan Guild standard, there's B Corp and all these kind of things. Firstly, a lot of them cost thousands of pounds that we just don't have in the bank, but also a lot of the measures, like the indicators that they're using in their assessments, are quite similar to what we'd want to use in our internal impact measurement system. So I'm thinking about sort of some, and then there's, you know, like the GOT standards and kind of the environmental standards and stuff, but some way of kind of bringing them together in a simple approach that's sort of ticking the boxes, although we can't say, okay, we can't have the badge because we don't have, you know, 5 grand or 10 grand or whatever it costs to go through the assessment, but sort of saying, actually, we do tick the boxes, and, you know, this is how we tick the boxes for the different standards, but having it as like one thing to focus on, as opposed to being pulled in so many different directions of like trying to, you know, fit this standard and do this. And yeah, I don't know, I'm articulating myself properly. I need a bit more sleep, but yeah, hope you get what I'm trying to say. So yeah.
Sorry, the other thing. Sorry, the other thing I should have mentioned that we invest into our own operations, and that's substantial each year. But we also give donations to local charities and groups. So all the sports groups, the children's sports groups in the area receive donations from us. We have a hospice in Wrexham that is our major partner. We regularly do events with them and make donations. And we have a children's hospice in Oswestry that we give regular donations, and we're a partner with. So we have a two-prong. We're reinvesting in our operations as a social enterprise, but we give up to, I mean, it's a substantial amount back in donations to the local community. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Oh, and Sarah, thanks so much for recommending the We Make Change platform. They've actually just messaged me on LinkedIn, and I had it on my to-do list at some point, maybe over the weekend, to get in touch with them. So that's great. You know, there's loads of these people that like hit you up, and some of them are more useful than others. So that's great to know that they're useful. So I will put that higher on my to-do list. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just going to voice that over for anybody that's watching on the recording. So Sarah's put in the chat, talking volunteers, we've just started to recruit research volunteers to help us with our impact report. WeMakeChange.org are a great platform if you're looking to do the same. So just if anybody's watching on the recording and they can't see the chat.
Yeah, and again, talking of volunteers, if I can be useful to any of you guys in terms of like thinking through impact measurement approach stuff, then please let me know, because I've had so much incredible support from like Jitna, particularly, who's on this call, but loads of other social entrepreneurs as well have like helped me with so much stuff. So if there's anything I could do, then it would be a pleasure.
That's great. I know, just finally, you know, we've got a few minutes left. If anybody does want to share any hints and tips about what they're doing to measure their social impact.
Hi, Laura, thank you so much. That was really, really interesting. And I think for me, it was really good to have someone coming from the impact side, because I think a lot of us start things up without having that head on that you've got on, you know, you're coming in from a different direction, so it's useful. I mean, where does it come from, which I run, is we're very much from the story side. So I started very much with that question, where do things come from? And so it's been around telling the stories, which I think worked fine in a B2C environment where customers want to read a story, connect with people, whatever. But when you start working B2B, it's something that you mentioned in your presentation about having data, I suppose, and being able to prove carbon footprint and all of those kind of things. So that's partly where the challenge has been, and I wouldn't say we've really got there yet. So what we do when we run a B2B project is we speak very much with the customers to start with and find out what values, what sustainable development goals they want to map against, basically, and then we give them an impact presentation at the end, which then maps the project that we've delivered for them against the sustainable development goals that they're particularly interested in, and other ones as well that we think are cool. So we've done it that way. But in terms of your carbon footprint has been this and your whatever, that's something that is not something we're doing completely yet. We can do it in certain situations, but not all the way through. I see Susanna's nodding hugely.
Brilliant. Yeah, so you tailor it. Yeah, that makes sense, right? Is to figure out. So I've just done this analysis paper, it was called, for my master's, and I was looking at how we can better report our contributions against the SDGs. So again, we're doing all this like stuff to do with impact measurement, but actually none of it relates to the SDGs. We don't mention them at all, and obviously they're like a big framework that is, you know, kind of the thing, whatever. And so I was basically looking at it from the angle of how we can, like, you know, I would like to say that we're kind of trying to take sustainability and all its different dimensions seriously, and really kind of thinking about our impacts. But obviously there's loads of like big companies, I won't name names of them, who have big advertising and marketing budgets and stuff, you know, this thing of greenwashing and rainbow washing, which is like a related term for, you know, the rainbow colors of the SDGs. But how we can kind of try and differentiate ourselves, because we don't have any money for advertising and marketing and stuff, and be like, well, actually we're trying to do stuff properly and we're measuring it properly and things, and maybe like trying to align our measurement system with the SDGs. So I had to do a literature review and stuff because it was an academic thing, but I also spoke to other small social enterprises, and basically the message from all of them was just like, the SDGs don't resonate with customers. Like, people don't really know what and I think it's that point you say about kind of B2C versus B2B. Maybe B2B, or like grant funders, or I don't know, investors, whatever, care about that stuff, but with customers, like, not that people don't care, but it just kind of goes over people's heads, right? So it's about finding how to communicate impact in a way that makes people click, to put it bluntly, right, and buy things. So yeah, that's what I'm trying to figure out at the moment anyway, not very successfully. So yeah.
Yeah, I wonder if maybe one of the problems with the SDGs is there's too many of them for people to sort of get a handle on. We're like a 3-word slogan, don't we? And I think 17 SDGs is just too many for people to to keep track of.
Yeah. Yeah, and then all the kind of trade-offs between them and the relationships and stuff, it all gets a bit complicated, right? So yeah.
What I normally say is pick the ones that are important to you, on the understanding that there'll be loads of other ones that are linked in with them anyway, so you will actually probably deliver to about half of them, whether you like it or not.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's a really good point. Yeah. Well, it's been really lovely to chat anyway. So
yeah. So Laura, did you say you were looking for some people to contribute to your research at some point?
Yes, yeah. So I'm doing the strategic action plan thing. We're trying to do that at the moment, but then I'm going to be doing a dissertation, like for the second year of the masters, which is basically, it's a work in progress in terms of like what it's actually going to focus on. But basically the idea is to kind of come up with like a low cost sort of action oriented impact measurement system, like drawing on what we're doing already, but integrating the financial side, both that we can use, but also that other social enterprises, you know, who don't have budget and human resources and time and energy and lots of brain space to devote to this, that can, you know, other organizations can use. So if anybody is potentially interested in getting involved in piloting whatever I come up with, which would involve, I guess, you know, kind of pro bono consultancy support from me in terms of helping you figure out your impact measurement approach. I'm not 100% sure what it would look like yet, but yeah, if you're interested, then please let me know.
Yeah,
And
so as I said,
think
we're sending around the slides, so Laura's contact details are on there. And if once you know exactly what you're looking for, let me know and I'll put the word out for you.
it'll probably be July. I think what month is it? March. Yes, probably
Yeah.
July. I should be clearer in terms of, yeah, like what the benefits would be for people involved and kind of what the requirements would be, if that makes sense.
So thank you so much to everybody for coming along, and particularly thanks to Laura for a fascinating presentation. As I say, I'll be in touch with the link to the recording if you needed to see it again, and with the slides. So it just remains for me to say thank you so much for coming along.
Cool, thank you so much, and hopefully everyone has a great afternoon.